Acooa, Ellis and I have the privilege of leading community impact here at the Greater Twin Cities United Way, and we are so excited to have you join us today for a conversation around career and future readiness. I am going to turn things over to Stephen Walvig on our team, who leads career and future readiness investment on behalf of United Way. So with that, Steve.
Thank you, Acooa. And thank you all for being here today. As Acooa mentioned, we're going to be talking about career and future readiness. We're going to be talking about those types of youth programs that really have those amazing and impactful opportunities to help youth be on the path for success moving forward. We've got some amazing community experts, speakers who will be having a conversation with us today. So I just wanted to give you a context as to what we're going to be doing. We've set this up as a conversation between community experts and the United Way, and really allowing you to listen in to what the magic is happening at these organizations. So I encourage you to think about maybe some questions you might have. We'll be opening up at the last half of the meeting, the last 15 minutes of the meeting, for some questions and answers. But really, we're going to kind of jump in and dive in and learn a little bit more about career and future readiness. To give you a little bit of an insight as to what we're going to be doing, we also want to get your feedback throughout this presentation. In your folders, there's a little piece of paper with a QR code. I know some of you have already found that and gotten online to our Poll Everywhere online polling software. What we'd like to do is maybe get your feedback on how much you know about career and future readiness already, and maybe sort of how engaged you are. And then hopefully by the end of this session, we'll see some change in that. So grab that QR code, get up and running. You can also use your camera app on the QR code at the front screen if you want to join in that way. And to jump in, this is what we're seeing already. You can jump in the poll anytime and add your scores. But what we're seeing is there's a lot of people here who are already personally engaged, a lot of people who are generally informed, and a few of you who maybe are hearing about career and future readiness for the first time, and that's great. So what we're going to do is really bring everybody on board to what these types of programs are all about, and hopefully maybe encourage you to get even more engaged and maybe even inspired to act to support youth in these types of programs. So for the agenda today, I'll be doing a welcome and an overview. So first I want to say welcome to all of you here today. Just a note, we do have some snacks and refreshments in the back. If you're looking to get online, we do have the online password on either two walls. We may have a few more people joining us, and so hopefully they'll be able to sneak in, but make room as people come in. One of the things that we'll be doing throughout this session, of course, is thinking about the career and future readiness and the questions. We're also taping this on Facebook Live, which is a new thing for me, so hopefully somebody online can see what I'm doing. If not, hopefully I'm not just a body without a head. But we'll also be taking questions from those of you online. So send your feedback and your questions, things you would like to ask our panelists for the Q&A session online as well. So with that said, one of the things we're going to be doing today, of course, is focusing on this conversation with our community experts here today, and thank you so much. So we have both Dr. Tracine Asberry from St. Paul Youth Services and Reverend Dr. Alika Galloway from the 21st Century Academy. I'll say more about them in just a minute, but what I'd like to do is give an overview about how all this work relates to the Greater Twin Cities United Way, specifically also more details about career and future readiness. So this is a visual we often use to talk about our work. And what we're trying to do is really create that vision and make that vision real of creating a region where all people thrive regardless of race, place, or income. We've worked with all of you as community members, supporters of the work of the United Way, to think about the greatest needs in our community and how do we address those needs through really focusing on outcome with equity at the core of all that we do and working towards positive outcomes in economic opportunity, educational success, and household stability. And of course, the United Way does that in many different ways. We're known for our grant making, and I see some grant-funded partners here, agency partners here. I'm so excited that you're here. We also do that through capacity building. So working with our partners and really helping them leverage their impact in the community by building up their capacity together in partnership. We're also doing that through impact measurement. So as an organization, we are very much focused on data and making sure that we're learning from all the information we're getting from our partners and using that data to make data-informed decisions about how to improve the work that we do in our community. and also sharing out that information so our partners can benefit from that as well. And of course, lastly, our systems change work. Really hoping to support the systems that make all of these investments happen, that really support our community partners in the work that they do, and really make those changes we want to see in the systems that we have and that we operate in. We like to say, and it's true, together we thrive, because it's a community that makes all this work happen, and we're so thrilled you're here today to be part of this conversation and part of this work, helping to support youth and organizations that support youth. Digging in a little bit deeper into educational success, of course, we have an aspiration where all young people are prepared to thrive in education and their future lives. We believe that the key to that is thinking about 3 critical areas of development, starting in the earliest years with early childhood education and parenting programs, making sure that young people have what they need to be prepared to be successful when they enter school. Career and future readiness programs. Often these programs used to be called, and still are called, out-of-school time programs, after-school programs, extended learning opportunities. And we've decided to change that name to really reflect the amazing output and the outcomes that are being achieved in these programs. Calling these programs simply out-of-school time programs or after-school programs defines when they happen, but not what they're achieving. These programs are not just a safe place to drop off your kids. These programs are helping young people find themselves, help them with their social emotional learning, get them connected to caring adults, providing curriculum that's culturally responsive, that really focuses on them as individuals to help them achieve their goals in partnership with those young people. So it's not just out-of-school time. What we're doing, the magic is career and future readiness, really helping people define their own futures and make those futures happen. And of course, we continue that work through the high school years with things like our career academies, really helping to launch young people off into their future careers with really strong career pathways in our high schools. And foundational to that, of course, is our holistic approach that acknowledges that to do this work, to make educational success happen, we also have to think about the families. We have to think about household stability, making sure that people have safe, affordable housing, that they have access to healthy, culturally relevant food, and that there's economic opportunities for their families so that they really have a livable wage to give back to their families and their communities. And a lot of our partners are also doing that work too. So even though we talk about career and future ready programs, our program partners are also thinking holistically with the United Way to make these impacts happen in our community. In addition to these types of supports, as I mentioned before, we're of course always thinking about advocacy, we're thinking about system building, we're thinking about capacity building. We have programs for the career and future readiness area, one called Propel SEL, that over the last 3 years has been doing a deep dive in thinking about social emotional learning and what we can do as adults to be better practitioners in implementing social emotional learning, as well as what really needs to be done, what further research needs to be done to understand how better to get the youth outcomes that we hope to achieve in these youth programs. So to dive in a little bit closer to career and future ready programs, I'm really excited, thrilled actually, to have 2 amazing community partners, people that I love dearly, speaking here today, having a conversation with us all. The first is Dr. Tracine Asberry, the Executive Director at the St. Paul Youth Services. Dr. Asberry has been a middle school teacher for 10 years in the Minneapolis Public Schools. She's been a Bush Fellow. She has her Master's in Education and a PhD in Critical Pedagogy. I had to say that a few times because I kept messing it up. So I'm thrilled that she's here today. And if you would, please join us up front. And can we give a hand to our first speaker? Back. Our second amazing presenter is the Reverend Dr. Alika Galloway. Reverend Galloway is the Executive Director of the 21st Century Academy. She has her Master's in Divinity from the Interdenominational Theological Center of Atlanta, Georgia, and is a national expert in issues around health disparities in African American women, She's a founder of the Northside Healing Space and is a co-pastor of Liberty Community Church. I'm just super excited that you're here. Reverend Alika, why don't you come on up? And to set the stage for what career and future ready programs look and feel like, we have a wonderful video from the St. Paul Youth Services that I'd like to tee up in just a second. I'm going to turn off the lights, or just the front lights here, so you can see it just a little bit better. We're going to watch this video. It's about 2 minutes long, and then that'll give us an opportunity. It'll be right above you if you didn't want us.
Adults don't realize their profound impact. They try to tell me who I am. Clueless, disobedient, promiscuous, illiterate, aggressive, savage. They only see my hoodie, headphones, and a do-rag. The cradle to prison pipeline. It's a shame they're miseducated.
Never be limited by other people's limited imagination.
To be young, conscious, and black.
It's to have a sense of identity, culture, and community.
It means dismantling and disrupting systems.
Rewriting the rules, knowing your rights, and reclaiming it.
When authority doesn't hear you, when authority doesn't see you, understand it to transform it.
Every problem has an answer. Look deep enough to find the solutions that have always been there. You can learn who you really are and hold people accountable.
Because when we understand ourselves, we love ourselves.
And I will.
Improve the places and spaces that impact lives.
The quality of life.
I will be strategic and intentional with my decision making. A voice for social entrepreneurship.
I will tell my story.
I will tell my story.
I will
Tell my story.
And I will be free.
Free.
So I wanted to show that video because it really gives some feel about just how well, especially with the St. Paul Youth Services, you think about amplifying youth voice, and really how do we give power to youth to tell their story, to tell their perspective. And so could you tell me a little bit more about your approach and how this video really reflects that approach?
The video has me so pumped up, but it's also about to make me cry every time I see it. I'm so happy to be with all of you to tell our story at St. Paul Youth Services. So Youth Power is a dream that was deferred for 3 years that became reality in 2017. And so I started at St. Paul Youth Services at 2014. I spent 3 years meeting with our young people who were in our current programs. We have a legacy of innovation because we provide an alternative to the juvenile detention center through diversion program. And so I talked to youth from our diversion program, I spoke to youth from our behavior intervention program, and I asked them what type of program would they like if they could create a program. Because the diversion program and the behavior intervention program were required, right? Because they made a decision that wasn't a healthy decision. But we didn't want to be around just because young people were making poor decisions. We didn't want to have to prove how bad they were. We knew that we could take all that energy and reverse and do something magical. So 3 years speaking with our young people, conducting workshops in the Twin Cities, we developed Youth Power together with young people and their families. And Youth Power is a paid leadership institute where we honor the intellectual capital that young people have. They have experiences and expertise being connected to the court system, to Ramsey County, being students in schools, seeing when adults get it right, seeing when adults get it very, very wrong, and they can help us solve a lot of the problems that we have. So we recruit our young people from our existing programs, right? And they come in and they work with superintendents, they work with city leadership, they work with us at St. Paul Youth Services so that we can finally get it right as adults. And so young people meet over the summer, and then during the school year, different times. And we just finished over the summer, which was really cool. We did a partnership with the Minnesota Zoo and Urban Boat Builders, and it was called Creating Healthy Black Futures. And we looked at reclaiming young people's right to have healthy living, active living, and healthy eating. And it was magical. We have an article in the Pioneer Press because they couldn't believe it. Because I think a lot of times people don't see young people in that way, especially Black young people. But we're changing all that at St. Paul Youth Services.
And I love how one of the logos you have, the mottos you have is, don't let the system change you.
Absolutely.
Change the system.
Yes, because we spent 45 years working with situations where systems were changing kids because of decisions that they made, decisions that maybe we made when we were younger, but it wasn't as punitive, right? So now things are punitive when kids make poor decisions. And so it's about kids changing systems versus systems changing kids, taking all that energy, all that knowledge, and then using it to solve solve problems in our communities.
I love it. Dr. Reverend Galloway.
Alika?
Or just call you Alika. Pastor Alika. Yes, ma'am. Pastor Alika.
Okay. You know, I want to introduce you to 21st Century staff, and this is Andre, Sarita, and Lakeisha, and particularly Sarita. So about 20 years ago, we were in a conversation. We were part of the Freedom School movement, yay! And we were in conversation about Freedom School and what's next, so that everything that we do at Liberty Community Church, 21st Century, Freedom School is always around a liberation ethical lens. And so we start with analysis, we start with reflection, we do some active participation. And so a group of adults were sitting around and we were talking and we were thinking that we were solving all of our young people's dilemmas. And all of a sudden the door opened up and about 10 or 12 of them came running in the door, and we're like, okay, what's happening? Because we're in North Minneapolis, and you just kind of never could tell what was going to happen at that time. And so they came running in, and they stood, and they circled around us, and they said, we want to tell you one thing. And I'm like, uh-oh, we are in trouble. And they said, no decision about us without us. Mm-hmm. No decision about us without us. And of course, we wanted to say some additional things to them. But when we looked at their face, we could see that they were not only being transparent, that was a transformational moment for us. And we thought that we were making really great decisions, and I think we did make some really great decisions. But unless you have the person in the room assisting you making the decision, then you absolutely profoundly strip them of their humanity, their voice, and their power, because the only way you really understand power is to use it. That's it. It's practical. And so we began then to really change our paradigm. We considered ourselves liberation ethical folk, and so then we have to include every voice. We have to include every person. And we have to, in fact, not only include, but honor, listen, move, act. Because in the liberation model, unless it's action reflection, it is ungenuine. It does not work. And so that moment of transparency and transformation then allowed us and to engage us to think about the work that we do differently. So then as we began to be in conversation, not only with our, I was about to say revolutionaries, because that's what they were at that time. We were very grateful for that. We also began to think about collective impact and interdisciplinary conversations that look at adults, children, everyone engaged in the community to transform this sense of power from being hierarchical to communal.
Love it. That's beautiful. And that speaks to the holistic approach that you take. That is just so beautiful. Like I mentioned before, these programs don't happen in isolation. We're not talking about youth programs where it's just career and future readiness programs and you're not thinking about all the systems in which these youth operate that are working for and against our youth, and how do we support youth in showing up and making change in those and disrupting those systems. Could you speak a little bit about the holistic approach at the St. Paul Youth Services, Dr. Tracine?
Sure. So, can you hear me? Okay, great. I love this, by the way. I love this. I kind of feel like I want to lean in, maybe sit on the floor, and have this conversation. Yes, I love it. So at St. Paul Youth Services, the Youth Power program focuses on 3 things. We start with healing and identity. We have exploration and innovation, and then we move to policy change. Now, healing and identity is at the heart of what we do, because if any of us go forth and try to make decisions and we're broken, and we usually have some brokenness, we have some trauma, but especially the young people that we work with, because of they have at least 1 or 2 touches with the juvenile detention center, right? With poor experiences that they've had in school. And so we start with that healing and identity, which is such a critical piece, because we're looking at all of the narratives that are out there about Black youth, and Youth Power is right now all Black youth. And initially, I started off and I said, we'll have, all the kids that we're working with, and when I looked at the data, who are we working with? Black youth. And so it was a conscious decision that I made as the leader of the organization, which is nice being the leader, right? To make those decisions. And I made the decision that we were going to work with Black youth. And since 2017, that's who we've worked with. And we do it unapologetically. And I think that, Leslie, we've even had conversations about that when people will post something on social media and people will say, well, what about, white kids? What about, Latina kids? And, we love all kids, but when we look at the data, when we look at the realities, when we spend time with our young people, if we still have to ask why Black Lives Matter, that's a problem, right? That's a problem. And so I no longer explain it, right? I say, look at the billboard. Have you guys seen the billboards all over? You can turn on the news. It's really clear. So what we do with the healing and identity is we recognize that young people are bombarded with other people telling them who they are. And it's nothing good. It's nothing beautiful. And my background, what I knew, the thing that I was going to say that gets me up in the morning is Black genius. I was surrounded by innovation. I was surrounded by people that loved me. In my neighborhood, on my block, in my family, being the youngest of 8. And our young people have that too, but the narrative is just bombarding them that is so contrary to that. It takes time away, which is why we have a hub at our organization at St. Paul Youth Services, a place where young people can come, and I'm going to swear, plot shit, which is what I call it. Because it's a place that it has the conditions for them to be truly who they are, right? And it's a place where they can come and they can talk about the things that they're worried about and recognize that they're not the only one. So that healing and identity is critical, and that flows through our entire program all the time. Exploration and innovation, the second step, that's when we go out to places, or places come to us, or people come to us, and we see if they're doing what they say they're doing. So for example, the project that we were at Minnesota Zoo. I talked to the zoo folks, I talked to urban boat builders. I said, 19 Black youth are coming, ages 13 to 18. They said, oh, great. I said, are you ready? I said, are you ready? They said, oh, yes, we're ready. And I knew, but I said, it's kind of like talking to a teenager, I said, I'm just going to see what happens. So we went in. The kids were inquisitive. They did great. They wanted to build a boat. They built a canoe. It floated. It was awesome. But the zoo folks weren't ready. They weren't ready. They weren't ready for just youth. Do you guys remember being middle school, high school kids? Somebody's laughing to us. So it's not. So it's, you get the truth, you get attitude, you get love, you get hugs, you get it all, right? The stuff that we have, but we probably do it behind closed doors. So, when I talked to the zoo folks, because we had a situation, they apologized. I said, you know what though? You need youth power. And they said, what? I said, let us help you. Let us help you be who you say you are. So that who comes here, because I've had a membership for 22 years. My oldest is 22. We've had a membership. And I said, and I know who comes to the zoo, but if you're serious about who you are and who you are for, let Youth Power help you. And so we've started that conversation, and that's what we do. That's that exploration and innovation, helping people be who they say they are. The policy change is usually a no-brainer, but it's the most difficult part of the work, because the best way to keep things so that they exist and, and it's invisible is to institutionalize it. And we have a lot of things that are institutionalized to keep us where we are, right? But what we do is we talk to folks like the superintendent. Youth Power spoke to superintendent. They've actually made recommendations to the youth fund that was adopted for the city of St. Paul. They've met with the Met Council, right? They've come with me on site visits to talk about who they are so funders can actually see it in action. But the biggest thing that we have to understand, and I love it when you say this, it's the idea of saying, I'm a Black woman, but I don't have all the answers, right? And I think so many times we try to go and get something really quick, and fast, and we don't realize that we need solutions that are in proportion to the problem. And if the problem is serious, the solution has to be serious. If the problem is serious, the funding has to be serious, right? So that, Youth Power, it's structured in a way, but it's very open, and it leaves funders oftentimes saying, ooh, you're asking us to pay kids? That has been a big thing. And I say, well, it's just like you and me. We get paid for our intellectual capital. And then people say, oh. And it's also what people think about our Black youth. And that's why I'm so happy to be a grantee. I love it. I feel like a queen, what is that, the homecoming queen with Greater Twin Cities United Way. I know you make everybody feel this way, but it is the best feeling for people to get it, to tell your story, and people say, I get it. I love that.
And, we talk about sort of all the different ways the United Way helps to support the systems change that you're talking about. Are there other examples you can kind of raise up to talk about how the United Way is helping to support the work that you're doing, helping support youth voice, other ways that you really see the United Way helping youth and what you do?
So you're asking me or us?
Would you like that?
Because really,
Pastor.
one of us can sit down. Because we're both telling the same story. And it's wonderful. It is wonderful. As a 65-year-old Black female, you are what our ancestors prayed for. Yes. Yeah. You are the hope and the dream of the slave. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you.
Would you ask me against me?
I love it.
Because I'm about to bust out, man.
Yeah. I think you said it beautifully.
Okay.
So what's one thing maybe that just inspires you to wake up? So, of course, there are people in our community who are just making it happen and are just beautiful souls and are really doing the work. What's the thing that motivates you?
So I do remember what you asked me, so I'm going to say two things about that and then move. Okay. But one of the things is, and I had shared this with Steve, is Steve started being present. So, I know how to raise money. We do that. We must raise money because we pay our children for everything regarding going to the bathroom, to bringing in good grades, to smiling, because it's never a question in equitable systems whether or not people who work should get paid. It's a question when Black children get paid. And so we make sure that as we talk about career and future readiness, they have to have some wealth. And so we work on entrepreneurship. We work on YPAR. We train them to be researchers so that, in fact, they have a side hustle. Because if the futurists are telling us that the day when you have one job, that's gone. You're going to have 3 or 4 side hustles, a PhD, and know how to wash dishes in order to be ready for this future and career. And I'm happy about it. That's our legacy. We've always done that, always had something on the side. But anyway, come back, Lika. I'll tell you what the difference has been. It is not just in terms of economics, and that's important. You have to have money to float the boat. But what it, for me, has engaged us so is the relationships, is the partnerships, is your stopping by, you're looking, you're being present. Donna's saying, oh, this is how you can get a vehicle. Go to the budget people, tell them what you're doing, tell your story, share your story. So that in fact, when we talk about thriving communities, Thich Nhat Hanh says it this way: we are here to awaken from the illusion of our separateness. Now y'all know I'm a preacher.
Hell yeah.
Y'all need to talk about that. We are here to awaken from the illusion of our separateness. That's what we can talk about, St. Paul. That's the reason why you guys come and visit. You're present. You're present. And then you've helped us when we talk about collective impact and creating a collaborative community. You've connected us with the YMCA, with ACES, with an opportunity to form a collaboration outside of, we've got the University of Minnesota, URI, many other collaborations which are important if we are going to participate in the thriving of our children.
I love it.
So, thank you.
Can I get a hug?
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And thank you. So you can see the passion in the room here. And really what it is a call to action.
Yes.
You have both kind of spoken to it a little bit, but if there is one thing that all of us here today, I think everybody in this room wants to do something, wants to jump in, wants to act. What's one thing we can do today? Yeah.
Want me to start? You keep standing up and sitting down. I'm waiting for you to take to the aisle.
I would.
Yes, indeed. I love this. I think that, I know that we are saying similar stories, but when was the last time where you were in a space with someone who was telling a similar story? You know what I mean?
That's right.
That's the thing that
This is a gift.
Yes.
This is a gift.
I love it. And Steve, just going back to when you talked about United Way, I have to tell you, the first meeting that we had, and I can't remember the community area over in St. Paul, you know what I'm talking about, the space. And I walked in, and I expected to see you and Leslie, and then I saw Tiffany, and then I saw Acooa, and then I was like, everybody's here. And I was even telling Sheila, I said, they're like, they know what's going on across, because it was a different grant. And I said, oh, I'm seeing everybody. And so every time I would say something to one of you, I spoke to Tiffany yesterday, and I said, Tiffany, yeah, we're having a big event in December. And I said, yeah, digital storytelling. She said, we need to talk. And I said, I was talking to a friend of mine who's also an executive director. And I said, it felt so good to have a champion. Because as an executive director, you're pushing, you're looking for people who are ready to hear the story. You're listening for people and you're watching for people who have those values, but who will live those values, which is a different thing, right? To nod and to say, if you say amen or you snap, but to actually act and to make the tough decisions and to advocate, on my behalf. That's an ally.
Yeah, that's right.
I don't need another friend. I'm the last of 8 in my family, so I've had like 10 parents, my entire life. But to have someone who's an ally, a champion, where I can sit back and someone will say, oh, no, we need to talk. You need to know what's going on across the river. That's a beautiful thing. Getting to your question, because you know how Alika and I gonna do it. But we'll get to it. When Ferguson's happened, it happened, I think about 2 months after I started at St. Paul Youth Services. And I didn't quite know the board yet, but I knew I had to say something. And so again, it helps to be the youngest of 8. It helps to be that one that was always pushing, and to be a teacher in North Minneapolis and have, and to be a parent, a single parent. I'm used to pushing, right? But I wanted to make sure that I told the story in such a way that would allow people to ask, what can I do? Because sometimes when things happen in another city, even if things happen in St. Paul, like you said, people don't see themselves, right? Across another state, people really don't see themselves. But I wanted us to see ourselves, right? In that almost like one of the earliest situations. And so I wrote a piece called No More Fergusons, and I capitalized sons at the end. And I wrote about how Black boys are looked as older, They have higher expectations, but lower support, right? And so it's not, that's even before you get to the juvenile detention center or jail. But even I have an 8-year-old, and I have to tell you, my son is 8, my oldest is 22, and then I have a 19-year-old daughter who Leslie knows because she went to Howard, and my youngest daughter is at Howard right now. But I have been up to his school as an 8-year-old third grader, more third grade than my 2 girls combined. And it's for silly stuff. We were watching Miles. We saw him, one time he threw paper in the bathroom to make it stick to the ceiling, right? Yeah, he did it. He did it. My kid did it. And because I used to tell my kids, look, I'm a single parent, so I said, look, I have to go to work, right? And I need to be focused at work. You need to go to work, which is school, and be focused, because we're trying to do something as a family, right? They think they're teaching you math and science, but we're trying to do something, right? So Miles at 5 in kindergarten, he wanted to do, something, get some attention. So he threw the paper, he got caught. The behavior specialist took him and walked him all around the school to the bathrooms trying to find paper to pick up, because he was thinking that was in proportion to what he did. So they went, he said, he actually told me this. He said, we went back to the bathroom, but it had been cleaned up. So we went to another one, and I said, wait a second. I said, what time is this? How long did this take? And then he said, he started looking at me. I said, okay, keep telling me. And then he said, and then Miles had to sit in the office and wait because we wanted to make sure, they had to write it down. And I said, how old is he? 5, right? Then he had to go back to his classroom and apologize to his teacher. I said, why is he apologizing to the teacher? I don't understand this. And then she emailed me. And I said, good Lord, right? And by the time I told the principal, and he was actually, I said, Miles made a mistake. He's 5. And I said, he made a mistake, and he feels that. I said, but you know what he also told me? He said, Mommy, I feel like I'm a bad person. And I told the principal, I said, now Miles made a mistake. I said, and he's in kindergarten. I said, do you realize he's gonna make more mistakes? I said, what are you gonna do then? I was like, where do you go from here? And I think that one of the things we have to understand, right, in our heads and in our hearts, because they have to work together or we just don't move, right? But we have to understand that it is starting so early for our Black youth. And this is my first boy, and I'm not gonna lie, when I found out I was having a boy, I cried. Oh, yeah. I did, because I had my girls, and I knew it was tough with them, but I knew too much. I was a teacher. Right? I knew too much. But what it has turned me into is a fierce Black mother. And so I talked to that principal. I said, I want you to fix this so I don't have to. And he got on board and he got the staff on board. And it wasn't that Miles needed special treatment. That's what I need you to hear. This isn't special. This isn't special, right? This is just realizing that developmentally, when a 5-year-old kindergartner makes a mistake, you see that child as a 5-year-old kindergartner making a mistake. That's all it is, right? And of course, I couldn't there was nothing I needed to do but to rebuild my child and to let him know who he was. And it didn't take long because he had that foundation. But some of our young people do not have that foundation. And so we never want to be the one to add to that negative experience. And so we created these cards, we call them tip cards, and you all will be able to come up. I brought enough for everyone. And I had people that wrote back after the piece that said, Tracine, what do I do? How do I talk to young people? I take the bus every day. And I don't know what to say. I don't know how to engage the conversation. Now, the old me would have been like, come on now, you don't know how to have a conversation. But the new me, because it's about the kids, I'm like, let me tell you what to do, right? And so it's real simple. It says in the inside, it says, pushing limits is a natural part of youth development. but how we respond can change a child's life for the better or the much, much worse. And it has 3 things that you can do. It says, this tip card is about, number 1, you listen. Number 2, you show respect. And number 3, you're smart, fair, and loving. And it sounds like it's Philly, foo-foo, but the smart part, I'm gonna tell you something, that smart part is based on research. You need to know what's really going on, right? So you need to be informed, right? The fair is that you have to have a commitment, not just to racial equity, right? And it sounds really good, all this work and anti-racist work, but you have to have that commitment that Alika, you talked about, is like, what was it, get rid of our separateness?
To awaken from the illusion of our separateness.
Yes, to see the connectedness to our kids. And the loving is high expectations with high support. And so this little tip card, it has a little more information than that in here, but I think that that's a general thing that every single person can do. So there's no excuse now, you have this one. Another thing that I think that it's really important, now you're saying you don't have a problem raising money, so you don't need to give Alika any money. It's on Facebook Live. I think you took a picture so we're good. So at St. Paul Youth Services, I wanna say this. St. Paul Youth Services, like I said, has been around for 45 years. And we grew out of innovation when we created an alternative to the juvenile detention center. But you have to imagine the shift from an alternative that just says, we're gonna keep kids out of jail, to an alternative that says, kids changing systems versus systems changing kids. So we took a hit. We've taken a hit the last few years on our funding because people say, we don't understand what you're doing. We think that you need to stay where you are. What are you doing? Are you holding kids accountable? Right? A lot of questions that are code for we don't believe in the vision that you have. And that's all right. Because I know that there are people like Greater Twin Cities United Way who do. And that's what's such an amazing thing. So we do need funding support. We have an amazing event coming up in December that's about youth-powered digital storytelling, where young people are going to help educators, librarians, anybody who works with young people understand their learning opportunities, understand how to talk to them, how to teach them, and that's needed to hear directly from the young people. We also have our website, which you will have when you get the tip card, to see other ways to get involved. We're looking for board members. We're looking for fundraising champions, and we have a lot of ways to get you involved and to keep you busy. So if you are looking to be involved and connected with an organization who's really making a difference in kids' lives that will impact the Twin Cities for generations to come, St. Paul Youth Services is this place. Thank you so much.
Hi, Pastor Alika. What can we do?
What can you do? Thank you. Thank you. All of that and more. So I started this work, really, I inherited it first, and I'm very grateful for that. But one of the ways that I started working this work was working with women and girls engaged in the survival sex trade and commercial sex trade and violence. And what I noticed right on, we did a lot of qualitative research, began to hear women and girls' stories, began to ingest them, began to ask them critical questions, and began to follow them and be with them. This sense of being, this sense of sharing our humanity is really important. Going to crack houses, going to the corner, going, listening, observing. And one of the things that was very present and very heartbreaking in a way is that we would begin to hear stories of the blonde-haired, blue-eyed girls that were trafficked, but rarely heard the stories of the black girls and the girls of color, particularly if they were poor. Those stories were not told. The stories of the black women who were trading sex in order for their children to be able to go on a field trip was not told. Those are the stories that actually catapulted us again to this work, particularly working with middle school age children, because we understood that the survival sex trade started at 11 and a half years old in North Minneapolis. That's middle school babies. You should be playing, you should be enjoying it. So as we talk about the adultification of our children and the consequences of that, is so widespread, but underneath that is generational poverty, underneath that is racialized trauma, and underneath that is generation to generation to generation to generation of stories that are not told because white society, and particular white supremacy, has told us to be ashamed of our own victimization. And so it is time for us to begin to tell these stories as oneness. In the civil rights movement, there was a little logo and a saying that said this, and this answers your question, I hope. When you see something, do something. I'm grateful for my doctorate. I'm not grateful for the student loans, but I'm grateful for that. But it doesn't take a doctorate to understand when you see something, do something. Do it. Take care of it. Manage it. Many of you are on boards that we will never have access to. Many of you have opportunities to have conversations in your families. Many of you have a chance to do our own work. So part of what sets 21st Century aside is that every one of our team must be in therapy. They must be in therapy because they are engaging people with multiple layers of loss. And then their multiple layers of loss get triggered, and it gets real messy up in there. And so if we are in a process of collective healing and restoration, then the universe gets restored. Do it together as a collective. Stop being ashamed of your own victimization. White supremacy victimizes you because it separates you from your brother and sister. We've got to do our work, and it's hard work. The older kids came, and we wanted them to leave. They said, no, we're going to stay here. So now we're K through 12 with still an emphasis on middle school. So I decided I would play outside with the babies. And so Lakeisha, who is our program director, raise your hand, Lakeisha, told me over the summer, now, Pastor Alika, there may be some 4-year-olds here. And I said, And she said, well, I just won't tell you their names. But I have 4-year-old granddaughters, so I know what a 4-year-old is like. And so I just pretended like I didn't see them because we are love-based, not rule-based. And so if the high schoolers can't come because they got a 4-year-old, come on, bring them. And my children are 50, 38, and 32. So I know if one can't come, everybody got to come. And so I saw that little 4-year-old, and I said, let me pray. And I'm literally praying, walking out like, God, could she be in kindergarten? And so she looked up at me with these great big eyes, and she said, hello, Patadika. I said, hello. I said, what grade are you in? And she said, I'm in kindergarten. Thank you. Oh, that's holy. Thank you. And she said, it's a pretty day. I said, it is so pretty. And because, I'm like, oh, what a beautiful morning. I could have busted out right then. And so I said, how are you today? She said, I'm fine. She said, Pastor Alika, I'm questioning. I'm like looking. And I said, what is it? She said, is it summer? I said, it is summer, kind of. But we're moving to the fall. What is that? I said, well, that's when the leaves fall down. She said, I don't want to hear that. I said, me neither. I'm a Cali girl. Me neither. She said, so I'm going to ask you. I said, what? That it just be summer for a long time. And I said, how are we going to make that happen? Because you're the genius in the room, apparently. And she said, just look up to the sky. So we stood there, this little 4-year-old that's all eyes. And she and I just turned our faces up to the sun. And in that was some hope that for her, she could live through the summer. She can make it because the data and statistics tell us unless we can reverse inequity, unless she is in a community that thrives, she's going to be in the pole. Unless we can break this opportunity gap, I may have to go get that baby one day out of the crack house. Unless we can find some sustainable housing so her mama doesn't have to couch hop and she has to trade sexual favors in order to lay down and go to school broken and not be able to tell her story. That's why this work is so important. Keep your head to the sky. Feel the sun. And when you see something, do something.
Love it. Love it.
I can't afford to replace that way much.
So we have time for maybe just one question from somebody in the room. And I so appreciate that you're staying with us here. But this is an amazing conversation. I'm so thrilled.
Oh, we're so grateful.
We did start a little bit late, so we got 5 minutes, 10 minutes maybe, if we go on that. So is there anybody in the room who'd like to ask a question? One question maybe before we go? Yes. Why don't you come on up? We'll give you a mic.
So I guess it's the beginning of the question. So how do we stay in touch with you? How do we do something? Some years ago, probably 6 years ago and more, Ramsey County at least was talking about creating the best workforce ever. And the challenge of that was that if you didn't give people jobs, especially our own kids, they were not going to be part of that workforce. And all the indexes about measuring their ability to be ready for that workforce, I think was false. It didn't provide hope. So can you address the issue of, as we talk about the future, whether we define career as just simply employment or not, but can we talk about how do we look at systems to make sure that they are creating those opportunities for our young people to actually be within that system, not talk around them without them being in it?
Right. So what you're talking about is really interesting. I just had a call with Nicole from Commissioner Harrington's office, and speaking about this very same thing, about figuring out a way so that young people can know that there are jobs in their city that they can go to. And so I think that the thing that I found, I have to find those champions, right? And I know, just to get really specific, like Nicole has worked in Minneapolis, she's worked in St. Paul, she's worked for a former mayor, and she understands the situation. And so what I've tried to do is to really get to know people within the county and to figure out how we can partner together to do those things. Now, the entire system is a monster, to be honest with you. But finding what Nicole said, I want to have a meeting. We're gonna bring in the youth so that they can see the opportunities that are here in their own city, which is a rare thing. And then she said, and let's have a follow-up on the 30th of September, which is also really huge, because usually it's say, okay, and you have the meeting and it's done. And so I hope that gives you some hope that it's not to say that little thing is in proportion to the issue that you raised, but there is some movement. And I will be happy to stay in touch to let you know as other things open up.
I would say, thank you so much, Alona. I would say that part of what we have to do as we look at a systems approach is see where the greatest need is and address that at times. That does not take away from what I just said. But as we look at systems, understand that the futurists are saying that it takes 3 or 4 generations to dismantle a system. And if that is so, let's not give up the hope, and let's not buy into this bifurcated illusion concept that is going to happen once you invest so many dollars for so many years and then you decide to get out. You don't do that with your 401k, so don't do it with the lives of our children. And so we need to look at systems for the long haul. And then I will also say, pass your system issue to your next generation. Have conversation around your tables. Inspire someone. Innovate, do radical hope, have a shift of hope regardless, and turn off the news. Turn it off. Do something that you can do within the system. And at Westminster, they always say this: plant trees in whom shade you'll never enjoy.
That's beautiful. And thank you so much. Can we give a giant hand? Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Pastor Alika. And I'd like to turn this over to Leslie Wright to close us out.
Thank you, and thank you. On behalf of the entire team at Greater Twin Cities United Way, we appreciate you. We appreciate the time that you took, and we got it as close to 1 hour as we could, to come and share and learn more about not only our partners, but our work in career and future readiness. Get involved, advocate, volunteer, join a giving community, and make a gift. Will sustain all of our programs. We are having another program, 1 hour, October 17th, on economic opportunity. And please, please come and share with us. We'll send you a survey. Please fill it out so that we'll get to learn more about what you want in future sessions that we can design for you. Thank you.